Yeah. That's right. You're cohort. You're just coming. She's got to be this December. Yeah, you don't know honey. No. No.
Oh, is this your water? No, right? I think I left it there. Again? Yeah. Okay. But is it fine like that, or is it you need it more?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, who's your machine here? Okay. Of course. Sabrina. And they have
My fat ass has to put.
no, stop it.
Well, you more than have because they were accepting one.
Oh, okay.
That's how we got.
Your BT work.
Yeah, not too bad.
Okay. Those are my pieces. It's hard.
Yeah, it's okay. I plan on happening in peace.
Yeah.
It's all good. Especially my first semester. I was like having. I've never had a panic attack in my life, and that was my first semester.
How many classes were you in?
I was taking units, not taking anatomy, and class and then 4:15.
You started this one?
I took 4 or 5 minutes.
I just started with one because everybody was talking about how hard they were, and I was so scared. So I was like, 4:15 sounds like you're getting your feet by class.
Yeah.
So
So I took 20 Phonetics was not that funny though.
No, me neither.
Yeah, phonetics is a good one. Of course, it's
The language ones I feel I connect with. The science ones are.
the science I like.
I like.
Classes like the early intervention is that kind of stuff. Yeah. It's funny because I'm minoring in child development. Oh. So it's great because I was struggling in the whole class. Right. Is your undergraduate? No, what did you do? My first when I got here. Oh, nice. Okay, so not too far from the.
No,
Yeah.
it's actually very. I know a lot of people go from linguistics and get their masters.
Yeah, I like the workshops. Yes, it's that first you were doing this, so have a good turnout. Yeah, hopefully continue next year. Hopefully I get an instruction. Because I know how to. Yeah, that's my grade with my with like the audiology class. So that's a tough one. New guy, so
I still don't.
yeah, a lot of people don't.
Yeah.
Tough and rough. 4.45. Yeah. Oh, really? I didn't know she taught that. I had it.
Yeah, I had Raylan.
He was well. I thought he's really nice. Yeah, his teaching.
I really
much,
enjoyed
yeah, much better than Dr. Okay. He's nice though. He's I feel like they're both great professors. It's just me personally. Depends on the professor and the classroom staff.
I gin. I really enjoyed that.
I kind of wish I had it. I feel like I know.
Well, you can gin.
I went once and she didn't know how to help. It was different stuff. I can't remember. Very first time. Okay, so I've never actually met her for time.
Yeah.
I've never had her, and she's always had open. Yeah. She's awesome. Hey Barbara, how are you?
So I talked to Pam earlier today
About Saturday? Yeah.
So what kind of direction are you?
Yeah. Like so far,
Is there anything that interests
we're gonna do some
well, I'm gonna be there
Yes.
regardless. Yeah. Okay.
for the invasion? Yeah.
Sorry. Oh, good. So far, yeah. Did you guys present or not yet? You're doing your Friday. Okay. Cool. Yeah. We haven't actually started like practicing yet. Yeah. Yeah, that's like really? Oh, man. How's that working out? What if you just like open one? Yeah, like just a meat. Yeah. I haven't been waiting for it to start to eat it, so. Yeah, why not? happened with your dad's
We're gonna
party?
get started. We're so excited to have these guests for today from the Behavioral Learning Center. I'll let them introduce themselves, but yeah, it's gonna be a great event. So thanks for coming. Excited.
So hello, everybody. We're super excited to be here, and I want to make this as interactive as possible for you guys. So as we get going, definitely feel free to stop, ask questions, give specific examples, because I want this to be as individualized as it can be with a small-ish group. So if you guys have individual questions, please let me know. And I do want, throughout I'll definitely ask you guys questions, and the more responses I get from you guys, the more you guys can get out of it. I don't want it to be a talking point. So yeah, with that, we're gonna get going. So I'm Shauna, and this is Jody and Sheila here. Jody, why don't you go ahead and
Hi, guys. Thank you for letting us come present. We're very excited. I am Jody Sigmeyer. I'm a speech language pathologist. I graduated in 2000 from a school in Canada. And we opened the Behavioral Learning Center in 2007. And I was a speech pathologist, and then my friend was the board certified behavior analyst. And then I actually went back to school to get my BCBA as well. So I'm a very rare kind of SLP BCBA combination. And we do serve kids primarily who are on the autism spectrum at our agency, and we do home-based services. And then about a year ago, we just opened our early intervention program, where we finally could actually start giving speech services to the 0 to 3 population, our early intervention population. So we're really, really excited to be able to now, come here and talk with you guys and really help out with some behavior management of the speech and language kiddos, and to the speech language pathologist, or the soon-to-be speech language pathologist, because we know how caseloads are now very full of kids on the spectrum. And if it's not kids with autism, but it's kids with other behavioral challenges or issues. So how practical hopefully this seminar tonight will be. And then we've got Sheila.
Guys, my name is Sheila Pearson. I'm actually alumni here, graduated in 2016. I actually worked for Jody, and she was the person who planted the seed for me to become a speech pathologist. So in 2009, I was a behavioral therapist at BLC, and she was like, "You should become a speech pathologist." I was like, "What is that?" And I wanted all the clients that I worked with were nonverbal, and they couldn't communicate, and that's what I was really focusing on and wanting to help with. So I went undergrad here, English disorders, then I did the grad program here. And I love the really young and the really old. So I do early intervention, and like Ruby said, it's in home. So I live in Santa Clarita, and it's amazing because I get to go to people's homes, and then it's really flexible. And then I also work in a hospital setting with adults, so I kind of do a little bit of both.
And I'm Shauna Munoz. I have been working at BLC for, 11, like 12 years. I started off there as a behavior technician while I was doing my undergrad here actually at Operand in biology. Just a little funny here. And, I took actually a year off because I was like, I don't know what I want to do. I really like this field. So after I took that time off, decided that was the path that I wanted to pursue. I went and got my master's in education and got my BCBA. And I currently am a regional clinical director at BLC. And it's an in-home program. So all of our services that we offer are done in the client's natural setting. They're not done in a clinic where it's a little bit harder to get those naturally occurring opportunities, which I really enjoy. There's that one less step of generalization that you have to deal with. It's already there. But basically, we just kind of wanted to let you know who we were, what we do, and yeah, we'll go ahead and get started. So the focus of tonight is going to be a really general overview on a lot of different topics. So As we get going, if there's any particular topic that you want to hear more about or delve a little bit deeper into or have questions on, definitely stop me, let me know, and we can kind of focus a bit. There's some flexibility on time here, so I'm not like constrained with time. So I want to make it valuable for you guys. So applied behavior analysis is a science. It is derived from socially significant behavior and experimentation that identify variables that are responsible for improvement in behavior. So it is very, very specific. We take lots and lots of data. It's one of the few fields that I felt really married my personal interest in, in undergrad in biology, where everything is data driven, and a more human field where you get, the interactions with a person on a day-to-day basis, and you get to improve their life. You kind of marry those two. So the applied behavior analysis is teaching or increasing socially significant or appropriate behaviors. So that is the main focus of the applied portion. So we only teach socially significant behaviors. So it might be really important for a family, for the client to do their laundry. But if they don't have use of maybe their arms, well, are they ever going to do their laundry? No, it's not socially significant anymore. Or it might be socially significant for somebody who is maybe going to live on their own. It's not socially significant for those individuals, so we wouldn't target it. Makes sense? Behavior. So we select a behavior for change that must be observable and measurable. We'll get into that quite a bit more in detail on how to determine what a behavior is and what it isn't. And then the analysis portion, which is obviously one of the most crucial components, which is the evaluation to determine if action taken results in behavior change. So we don't want to select behaviors for change that are not going to be changed, or our intervention isn't working. So we really need to analyze all of the data that we're collecting in order to determine if the intervention that has been chosen is effective. ABA is an evidence-based practice, which means that clinicians are using procedures that have been studied carefully, and the results have been reviewed and published. So as speech language pathology is also an evidence-based practice, I think that's something that ABA has in common. The founder of ABA, B.F. Skinner, I'm sure everybody in this room in their, Psych 101 class learned about B.F. Skinner, but he's kind of, I guess, the grandfather, if you will, of ABA. So in the 1950s, he was understanding that behavior is a function of environmental histories of reinforcing consequences. So what that means is that our behavior is a function of the environment, and that the environmental histories shape our behavior. Makes sense? So, and also acceptance that private events, and you guys are going to hear a little bit more about that as well, like thinking or perceptions that are not observable do not cause behavior. They are environmental histories that strengthen or weaken behaviors. So we'll talk about that a little bit more, because that's another big thought. So we have the ABCs of behavior. So, and what that refers to is the antecedent, behavior, and the consequence. The antecedent is the internal or external event that occurs prior to the behavior that can evoke or abate the behavior. So either elicit or stop the behavior from occurring. The behavior is the activity of the organism or the individual, and it's observable and measurable action. And the consequence, the word consequence often has a negative connotation with it, but in this instance, there's no negative connotation with the word consequence. It's just simply what happens after the behavior. That's it. So kind of a hard thing to clear your mind of. You think of, your parents, and I'm going to give you consequences for not coming home on time. You think of, oh, I'm in trouble, but in this instance, it really is just what truly comes after the behavior. And then it will determine whether the behavior occurs again in the future. And we'll talk about what reinforcement and punishment is specifically. So behaviors. I think this is a really important thing to understand is behaviors are not emotions or feelings, because we cannot see or measure those events. So, for example, something like, targeting Johnny is frustrated. Nobody can really operationally define the feeling frustrated. It's different for everybody in this room as it is for every single one of our clients. So we have the ability to manipulate events or to create behavior change by using only clear, objective information to determine the true behavior change that's occurred. So, for example, could you collect data on feelings of your classmates if they didn't tell you how they were feeling? Do you know if the person sitting on your right is tired? Nobody here knows that unless it's a, oh my gosh, I'm so tired. I mean, you might be able to see some cues like yawning or keeping their head down. So those are things that we would target for change. So for example, if you're working with a client and you're like, they're always tired, they're putting their head down, they're closing their eyes, that's what we want to target, not the word tired. Because you don't know that they're tired necessarily. They're putting their head down because their stomach hurts. So there could be a whole variety of things that we kind of put our own histories into where that might not be the case, especially if you're working with an individual with autism, for example, because their emotions are so different from typical development. They may laugh when they're feeling sad. So it's hard to say that they were happy just because they were laughing. Make sense? And then if you can count how many times somebody smiled in 10 minutes, that's very discrete. Everybody knows what a smile is, and you can count that. So that's kind of the thing that we want to focus on. Is it a behavior? So I'll see a lot of times people saying things like they're not responding. That is the behavior I want to target, non-response. So that's not a behavior because a dead man cannot respond. So we call it our dead man test. It's not a behavior if a dead man can do it. So things like not responding or laying on the floor or not looking, those are all things that would not be considered a behavior. We would want to redefine what it is that we're working on for that behavior. So I have a couple little practice slides here for operationally defining or determining if it is a behavior. Running away from mom, is that a behavior? Can everybody see that happening?
Yes.
Yes. Definitely can. What about throwing items on the floor?
Yes.
Yeah. Having a headache? No, cannot see that. I always think of like the cartoons that have like little like things coming out of their head because you can't really see a headache. So I always try to picture also like a cartoon. If you can draw it appropriately, you can probably consider it a behavior. If you have to put other things to let people know what's going on, it's probably not a behavior. Being tired is not a behavior.
No.
We're just not talking about that. Being happy. No. What about bouncing the ball?
Yes.
Yes. What about feeling angry?
No.
No. What about ignoring mom's instructions?
No.
No. So that's kind of one that I didn't get a big no on. So ignoring instructions is one I hear often. Maybe you're doing a co-ed goal and they're just clients just staring at you. They're not saying anything, and this always happens with this particular word that you're trying to get them to say. Not necessarily that ignoring wouldn't necessarily be the target behavior you would want to work on. We would want to find what exactly they're doing. Maybe they're fidgeting with their hands, or maybe they're looking down, or something along those lines that we could then target. But we'll talk about how to identify behaviors as well. Being non-compliant. No, exactly. Good. So going over some antecedents. An antecedent is something in the environment that can be observed which results in behavior change. So there are environmental antecedents, and then there are also instructional antecedents. Environmental antecedents can be some examples listed here: alarm clock, stop sign, food, a phone ringing, a dog, a light switch, a fire alarm. It could literally be anything that's going to evoke the behavior. Instructional antecedents are typically instructions that we give. Come here, sit down, it's time to eat, let's play. Those are all typical instructional antecedents that we give that are going to evoke a behavior. Instructional antecedents should elicit the same response all the time. Now, if you say, come here to a 2-year-old and they run off in the other direction, that might be a behavior that we want to target for reduction. Now, if there's an environmental, an alarm clock goes off, most of us are probably going to get up and turn it off. Maybe somebody throws it across the room. Maybe somebody, it's news, maybe somebody doesn't even hear it. So there are lots of other types of behaviors that can happen with environmental antecedents. A good one's a dog. If I see a dog, I'm going to run over and want to pet it. Some people might cross the street. Some people might start crying. Some people might start shaking. Some people might have a memory of their favorite pet when they were little. So it's going to elicit quite a different number of responses if it's an environmental incident. We also have internal states, which are felt by the individual themselves, and internal states, which are also known as private events, cannot be observed by others. So we talked a bit about those. What are some examples you guys can think of internal states?
Happy, sad.
Yeah, happy, sad, tired. Maybe you have a stomach ache. Maybe you're in a fight with your boyfriend or girlfriend and angry, not really focused. Those are all internal states that are going to affect our behavior. So, if you're very tired and you're in class, maybe you're not focusing on exactly what the teacher's saying, and you're like, oh my gosh, I just missed that really important thing that's probably going to be on my test. Those are all internal states that will affect our behaviors. So internal antecedents affect what we call motivating operations, or also known as an MO. This is kind of what we like to call a four-term contingency. So there has to be an MO in effect before the antecedent in order to create that motivation for the antecedent and the behavior and the consequence to happen. So these things have a direct effect on the behavior, and it can be things like deprivation or satiation. So what that means is being deprived of something, hungry, thirsty, lack of attention. Maybe they haven't played with a special toy that you were brought since last week and they're really excited to see it. Or also satiation. If you're using an iPad with a game on it as a reinforcer, and they just played with it for 30 minutes before you got there, probably not an effective reinforcer. So those are all really important things to check with the parents, especially if you're working with little ones or somebody who maybe is not a verbal communicator. What were they just doing prior to our session? Were they playing with you, mom or dad? They're probably not going to be a good reinforcer because they have all the attention that they wanted from them for a good chunk of time. Are they just watching TV? Maybe, mom or dad is now going to be a good reinforcer because they've been deprived of their attention for 30 minutes because they watched a cartoon. So all those things are important to take into consideration before you even start the treatment session. What is my client going to work for? So all of you guys here are in school. Your MO is to get your degree and to get a job and make money. That's usually everybody's MO. Help kids, help adults, help, people with disabilities or, traumatic events that have happened in their lives. That's all your motivation. When you have a child, especially somebody who's on the autism spectrum, the motivation can be very challenging sometimes. So we'll talk about how to identify what is reinforcing and when to reinforce, and to make sure that your reinforcer is actually a reinforcer. Okay, so we have a couple things that I want to practice. So I have some antecedents listed here in the middle. And then on either side, you'll decide whether it's an internal or external antecedent, and then what behavior you would see based on that antecedent. And again, there's no one right answer. There's a lot of different answers that can be given, and I think that's part of the fun. So, feeling hungry, is that internal or external? Internal. And what behavior might you see when somebody's feeling hungry? Getting a snack. A meltdown. Yeah, you might see somebody screaming and crying because they have no idea how to help themselves eat food. Yeah, right, exactly. What else might you guys see?
Like agitation.
Agitation, exactly. Yeah, they might be maybe they're hitting you, and then one's like, oh my God, they didn't eat. It's been an hour. Here's a snack. So yeah, absolutely. Eating food. Being told to sit down. Internal or external? External. And what behavior might you see? You might see runaway. Absolutely. What else? Sitting What else?
Ignore.
Careful about that one. Because a dead man can ignore. So you might see not responding to the command by staying standing or continuing to play. So be careful about how you word that because a dead man cannot respond. So whatever the individual is engaged in, so say they're maybe playing with some toys at the floor and you say, sit down, and they keep playing with their toys, you would want to say they continue to play with their toys. So an example, sitting down in a chair. Hearing an ice cream truck, internal, external.
External.
Is it? Can you see somebody here? Yeah, internal for that one. What behavior might you see? Running to the ice cream truck, yeah. What else might you see? Yelling, yeah. If it's, oh my gosh, it's too loud. What else might you see? Yeah, clapping hands, yay, ice cream. So I put running outside. Beginning to shiver from the cold. Internal, external. Getting hearing a little bit above. External, yeah, you can see shivering. You know, people are a little cold. But if it just said cold, then it would be internal. But because it has that word shiver in there, it's not external. It will be either may you see. Yeah, get a sweater. What else? Rubbing your arms, yeah, rubbing your arms. Getting a blanket, going inside, complaining, I'm cold. Those are all things you might see. Getting a blanket. Seeing a yellow light when driving, internal or external? Internal, good. Can't see somebody see. You might be able to see like a turning of the head, but you're not going to be able to see them see. What behavior may you see? Yeah, maybe speeding up to make it through, or maybe slowing down. Those are all good options. Falling down and skinning a knee, internal or external? External. Good. What behavior may you see? Crying. What else? Whining. Yelling. Yeah, absolutely. All those. Seeing cookies on the counter, internal or external? Good. What behavior may you see? Grabbing a cookie. Yeah, what else? Yeah, maybe we just say cookie and they drop to the floor like, oh my goodness, cookie. Yeah, eating a cookie. Good, perfect. So motivating operations increases or decreases the effectiveness of reinforcers or punishers. And we'll talk more specifically about reinforcers or punishers because I want to eliminate those negative connotations with the word punishment because it's so often misused. Engaging in a behavior is dependent on the level of motivation. If the behavior results in something valuable, then the behavior is likely to occur. If the behavior does not result in something valuable or result in something aversive, then the behavior is less likely to occur. So, you know, I give the example all the time of an emerging speaker, and all of a sudden, the very first time they say, "Mama," and she's on the phone, and she's like, "Get off the phone, hang up right now." You know, give them that attention because we want to reinforce that behavior. Because what's going to happen if they say "Mama" and mom goes like this, they're going to scream, and then mom's going to hang up the phone and go, "Oh, what's you?" And then we just reinforce screaming. So we have to make sure that that behavior is valuable to whoever the individual is and whatever it is that you're working on. It has to have some sort of value. And if it doesn't result in something valuable, they're not going to do it. And it's simple as that. We can program for it all we want, but if it's not going to result in something of value to that individual, it's not going to work. And that's something that is sometimes challenging to tell families. You know, I'm so sorry that, you know, you really want your child to learn colors, but right now it doesn't matter if they know pink or purple because they don't have any words. So we want them to be able to say your name and food and water, snacks they like, and maybe some water. Those are the things that are going to get their needs met, not. So client response is evoked by the client's internal needs. So hunger, things that we can't see. So those internal things that we've been talking about, that is what evokes responses, makes motivation for clients. We are responsible for setting up the environment and materials to increase skill opportunities based on what is motivating at that given time. And it's going to change, sometimes minute to minute, sometimes day to day, sometimes week to week. Sometimes you get lucky. You have a client who loves this pony, and you can use it every session as a guaranteed reinforcer. So that's not really the norm. Most of us go into a session and like, what is it going to be today? It's going to be a surprise. And we really have to make sure that we're checking for that before we go. And so if we're using a pony and they just stay with the pony for 30 minutes, they don't want it anymore, they're not going to do it for you. MOs also increase access to natural reinforcers. Without or with very weak MOs, behaviors will not be invoked, period. If you had a trust fund at your house, endless amounts of money in it, you probably wouldn't get a job. It just, there's no MO there for you to get a job because you have endless amounts of money. So think of that with your clients. You know, I tell a lot of the families all the time when they say, but I just want him to eat dinner and be good because that's what you're supposed to do. You're right, it is. But while we're teaching this skill, we need to give them something to learn that this is what we want them to do. And I always say, would you go to work if you stopped getting paid? No, good. They're not going to come work for me if I stop paying them. So that's always an example that parents are like, oh, light bulb goes on. And I usually can get them on board pretty quickly. Another practice. So we have a behavior of answering the phone and saying hello. What might the antecedent be? A phone ringing. Yeah, absolutely. What about putting on a jacket? What might the antecedent be? Weather's cold. Yeah. What about crying? Fell down. Yeah, absolutely. What about stopping while driving? Yeah, absolutely. Again, there's no one right answer for any of these. It could be a variety of things. Maybe they stopped while they're driving because they got a text message and it was really important to have people over and text back. I don't know. People do all kinds of crazy things. So we're going to talk a bit about consequences now. Consequences, and I want to remove the stigma of the negative connotation associated with the word consequence. The consequence is simply what happens directly after the behavior. So when I'm teaching this word with new families, I often avoid the word consequence at all because I'll say, what was the consequence? The family says, you know, Johnny had a tantrum for 30 minutes. And I'm like, okay, what was the consequence? They're going to say, I put him in timeout. When in reality, they went over to him and said, stop doing this for 20 minutes before they put him in timeout. So I try to avoid the word completely because really consequences are just simply what happened after. The result of the behavior will determine if the behavior will occur again. Consequences only affect future occurrences of the behavior. If the consequence is reinforcing, the behavior is more likely to occur again in the future, thus increasing the behavior. If the consequence is punishing, the behavior is less likely to occur again in the future, thus decreasing the behavior. So when we're talking about punishment, again, removing that negative connotation, it just simply means that the behavior is going down. It doesn't mean that you're spanking or timeout or hitting or any of those other things that we have to associate with the word punishment. It just simply means that the behavior is going down. If you hear the CBA saying you're implementing new punishment procedures, oh my gosh. I mean, definitely it's the last resort, but there's not these, you know, the best example that I like to give of punishment procedure is the word no. If a client is clapping and you say no, and they stop clapping, you'll have decreased their behavior for clapping. No is a punishment. So it's not a bad thing to say no. Everybody needs to be told no. It's just, you're just reducing the behavior. That's all that it is. So we have a few different types of consequences. Reinforcement and punishment, as I kind of already mentioned. Reinforcement increases or maintains the future occurrence of the behavior so that the behavior continues to exist or is maintained. And punishment decreases or eliminates the behavior from occurring in the future. So with reinforcing consequences, we have what's called positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. Negative reinforcement is constantly confused with punishment, and we'll talk about why that happens sometimes. But it's not as complicated as it sounds. So Positive reinforcement, you just add something desired to the environment. Food, attention, activities, and again, this is all dependent on the individual because some individuals find tickling to be very fun and happy and they like it and will increase their behavior in the future. Some children who are maybe defensive to that type of sensation find that very aversive and their behavior is going to decrease. So you really have to be careful about overgeneralizing some of your reinforcers to your clients. So with negative reinforcement, you remove something undesired from an environment, something like chores or homework or stimulating settings or pain or hunger. The best type of negative reinforcement that I like to refer to is usually with adults, with children. So it is very reinforcing to make your child stop crying, no matter if it reinforces in a bad way, so to speak, the behavior that's happening. So with the example that I gave earlier, where if the mom says, you know, baby says mama for the first time, hold on a second, I'm on the phone. Baby starts screaming, oh, I don't want baby screaming. So now I'm going to make my baby stop screaming by giving them attention because that is reinforcing to me as the adult. Makes sense? I'm making the crying go away. So I have removed something that's undesired from my environment, which is the crying. The other good example for adults is you have a headache. Most of us will take some sort of pain medication. So you've now removed your headache and your chances of taking some sort of pain medication in the future when you have a headache have now increased because your headache went away. So then we have punishing consequences. We have positive punishment, which adds something undesired to an environment. Scolding, reprimands, non-preferred activities, golden star, positive punishment, spankings. You give the spanking, the behavior is supposed to go down. It's definitely not always the case though. We have negative punishment. It removes something desired from the environment. So we talk this a lot with like teenagers. You know, they break curfew, they lose their car, they're less likely to break curfew in the future. Those types of things. So they're going to lose privileges, activities, allowance, freedom, things like that. So how do I identify the consequence or the whether it's positive or negative reinforcement or punishment? I like to use this little table that I have right here with the positive and the negative on top and the reinforcement and the punishment on the bottom. It kind of helps you keep it straight in your brain when you're first talking about some of these things and saying like, what is the behavior? And then was something added or was something taken away? And then that will tell you whether it's positive or negative. And then if the behavior keeps happening, it's being reinforced. If it doesn't keep happening, it's not being reinforced, it's being punished. Sometimes it's counterintuitive to what you would think. Sometimes you would think spankings are positive punishment. Sometimes they're positive reinforcement. And the child continues to do whatever it is that we're doing, and that, for whatever reason, is reinforcing to them. More often than not, I see this with attention-seeking behaviors, and we'll talk about those types of behaviors a little bit later on. But I'll often see, especially in a school setting, the teacher is providing lots of attention to a student who is not on task by saying, no, we don't do that, we don't hit, we don't throw our pencils. Meanwhile, they're laughing and thinking it's hilarious to throw their pencils and they're having a grand old time because it's really reinforcing to them to get that one-on-one attention from their teacher or speech pathologist. So keep in mind, if the information is not provided on the future frequency of the behavior, you cannot assume it's punishment or reinforcement. So if you are not given so often people will come to me and say, oh, this behavior is happening, this is what I did, I'm reinforcing it. I'm like, I don't know, did it happen again? So there's no way for me to tell. I don't have a crystal ball to know if it's reinforcing or not until I see a pattern, whether this behavior is continuing to occur or whether it's not continuing and it's decreasing. A lot of parents, it's hard because they're so in the moment on a day-to-day basis, especially with their child with special needs or disability, and they see the behaviors happening every day. It's really fun for them to see a graph with a downward trend. Remember 2 months ago, we were up here at 20 times a day, and now we're at 5. I know it feels like you're still really in this, but remember when it was 20? And I'm like, gosh, that was really bad. How did I do that? But I can't handle the 5 right now. So it's really good for them to be able to see it is going down. And that's my favorite part of showing the data to the parents when they are in it kind of on a day-to-day basis. They don't always feel that it's working, but when you can show them that it's working, they're like, oh, this is working. Okay, good, I'm on board. And again, don't assume that a consequence is punishment or reinforcement if you don't have information on the future frequency. So we often put our own values on whether something is reinforcing or punishing based on how you would respond to that. So if you feel like something would reduce your behavior, you kind of project that on your client and assume that would also maybe decrease their behavior, but that's not always the case. We have to look at the data. Do you guys have any specific examples that you wanted to talk about, maybe with like punishment or reinforcement questions on that?
When describing a behavior, you have to stay as objective as possible, correct?
Correct. Okay. Exactly. So you would want to what we do call operationally define it. And I get very specific sometimes. So self-stimulatory behaviors are usually my favorite to operationally define because they are so specific. So I'll write out what the operational definition looks like, and I'll ask a novel person, usually my husband, who's kind of my guinea pig. I'm like, all right, do this. And I read it to him. You know, one of my favorite ones, it was like, I think it was like arms moving, fingers and thumbs back and forth, open mouth, and he goes like this. I'm like, oh no, shoot, they're at the shoulders. So because it's really hard for me because I know what it looks like to really get all those components in there, I try to have a novel person do what I've written down to make sure I captured everything. That's kind of my like rule of thumb. I just, you know, somebody next to me, I'm like, hey, do this. And then if they do, I'm like, that's not what it looks like. Then I rewrite it. I'm like, hey, try again. And that usually helps me to really get that behavior operationally defined and clear for everybody, including the novel person. Any other questions on that? Okay. So we have some examples of positive and negative reinforcement and punishment. So we have one example. Christine had an itch on her arm, so she scratched it to make the itch go away. The next time she had an itch on her arm, she scratched it. Do we add something or take something away? What did we take away? The itch. Good. And do we have information on what happened next time she had an itch? What did she do? Good. So we have adding something positive, and she did it again, reinforcement. So that, in that scenario, it's a positive reinforcement. Then we have Jessica was proud of herself for doing her homework, so she watched TV after doing her homework. She continued doing her homework for the remainder of the week. So do we add something or take something away? Added, yeah, we are watching TV, we added something to the environment. And then she continued to do her homework for the remainder of the week. Do we have reinforcement or punishment? Yeah. So we have the next one. Kim spat on her brother when he wasn't looking, so her mom took her toy away. What do we have here? Do we add something or take something away? Take something away. What about reinforcement or punishment? Is this if we were increasing or decreasing? Right, we don't know. We have no idea. I have no idea if that toy is something maybe she took away, toy she hates. And she's like, oh, doesn't matter, I'm fine. And she's gonna keep spitting on her brother. Then we have Mike hit his sister when she called him ugly, so his mom spanked Mike. The next time his sister called him ugly, he hit her. Did we add something or take it away? Add. And what about the future occurrence of the behavior? Is it occurring again or not? Yes. Again, so in this case, we have positive reinforcement. The spanking served as reinforcement for this child because they're continuing to do it. What they got out of it, I don't know. Maybe it was that they got mom's attention, or some, you know, maybe mom's been cooking for 3 hours, she's on vacation. And you know, comes over, gives them the spanking. Oh my God, I got mom's attention. Yes, let's do that again. Sure.
So with the first one, with Christine having an itch, a lot of people that we work with, though, it can be something like, notice they have a scab and pick the scab every time. So it can be an bleed, right? Yes. So so it's still positive reinforcement because, oh, I have another scab. I mean, even though it may hurt when you pull off the scab and it bleeds, but it's still positive reinforcement.
Yes, exactly. And again, It may, and that's kind of us putting our projections on the behavior, is that for us it would hurt, but maybe they just are not as sensitive to feeling and they just like seeing the blood and they feel nothing. This is so cool. So yeah, it's reinforcing for whatever reason. And we can talk about how to block that, so to speak. So, you know, there are things that we do have, you know, somebody who does a lot of skin picking, you might suggest that they wear long sleeves or long pants. I mean, if they do have a scab, they're putting like a really large Band-Aid over it, not a tiny one they're just gonna pick off, or maybe they wrap it completely around so they can't get to it. So there is no way for them to access that reinforcement, not to help with annexation. We'll talk about that. Couple more examples. So we have Sam pushed his sister. So his dad said he couldn't watch TV for a week. He stopped pushing his sister. So when we have something added or taken away? Taken away. And the future occurrence of the behavior is increasing or decreasing? Decreasing. Good. So negative reinforcement. Stacy went to work and then she got paid $80. She continued to go to work. What do we have here? Yeah, positive reinforcement. We have Jack is doing his homework and then mom says, good job. What do we have here? I'm hearing some positive reinforcements and some we don't know. So the positive reinforcements are coming from our own projections that we put onto the word good job because it has value to you as an individual. You like hearing good job. There are lots of clients that do not like when we bring attention to something positive that they've done, and it's not reinforcing at all for us to say good job. So in this case, we have no idea because it doesn't tell us if they continue to do the homework or not. So little meme here. If you're given a task you don't want to do, just start crying. They'll send you straight to the thinking chair. It's like a vacation from work. So this is my favorite. We see it a lot, you know, with parents. They want to put their child in timeout for not completing a task, but really what that does is reinforce that behavior because they are wanting to take a break. They're just communicating it ineffectively. So this is reinforcement. So we're going to talk a bit about the 4 functions of behavior. This is really key to a session that you're going to have to be able to manage the behaviors effectively, is to be able to identify what the function of the behavior is. There are 4 functions of behavior: attention seeking, access to tangibles or activities, escape or avoidance, and self-stimulatory. We have a little acronym called SEAT for self-stimulatory, the E for escape, the A for attention seeking, and then tangibles for access tangibles. So another little meme, it's all fun and games, so something like this all functional behavior. So with attention seeking, a client engages in a behavior which in the past was followed by attention. This will reinforce or maintain a behavior by giving attention, or it will eliminate or reduce the behavior by removing or withholding attention. So, for example, with the phone example, the client is on the phone talking, the caregiver is on the phone talking, the client is screaming, "Mommy, mommy, mommy," over and over and over and over. The caregiver finally hangs up the phone and says, "What do you need?" So they have just reinforced all of that screaming for attention rather than asking nicely and giving the attention immediately. So what I tell families all the time, I say, if you're going to reinforce the behavior, just do it immediately. Don't wait 30 minutes. You just strengthen the behavior. So, and I tell these all the time, people work, they're tired, maybe they had a bad night, maybe they're fighting with their spouse. I say, if you're going to not wait, if you're just going to give in, just do it right away. Just make the decision. I'm tired today. I'm just going to give in right away. It's okay. It happens. Everybody's human. Just do it immediately. We attention seek in a lot of ways, but it's really important that we reinforce appropriate attention seeking behaviors that we want to embrace. Everybody has that friend that posts on social media, sad, ... And you're like, what happened? Because they're looking for that attention. Oh my gosh, are you okay? Do we need to call you? They're looking for that attention. It's fine to reinforce it, just know you're reinforcing it. There's definitely certain instances where we wouldn't want to reinforce that type of behavior. So that's really what this is about. Make sure that if somebody is looking for attention and you don't feel like it's appropriate to respond, don't. Or say, like, for a child, it's much easier to say, we say, I want candy, when you don't throw something at my head. Whereas with adults, it's a little more challenging because you're not going to say, hey, I really didn't like how you, told Jenny that you didn't like me. That generally doesn't happen. People don't really like that confrontational piece that comes with some of the attention-seeking things and not providing them the attention that gets very uncomfortable. So then moving into escape or avoidance, engagement and behavior which in the past allowed removal or avoidance of an aversive event or stimulus. So we can reinforce or maintain a behavior by providing escape or removal of the aversive event or stimulus, or we can eliminate or reduce the behavior by following through with the demands, prompting, or task reduction. I want to be careful about saying task reduction because it really should only be used as an antecedent strategy. Task reduction is so often misused. If you say, we are going to do 5 more activities, the client's tantruming, they know what the demand is. You just told them we're going to do 5 things. They don't want to do it. So by saying, okay, we're just going to do 1, you've now told them that when they tantrum, they get to do less work. That's what you told them. It's very eye-opening when you present it like that. And it's one of the things that I feel like is taught so much, task reduce if they're, having a hard day, cut the skills back, but it has to be an antecedent strategy. You guys have to be able to feel the session before you deliver that demand and say, this client's had a super off day. Normally I would say 5, but I'm going to say 1 right now because I want them to be successful. So keep that in mind as you guys are, running your sessions, that you're checking in with the parents right before you get there. Maybe do they not sleep? Are they hungry? All those variables are going to come into play on how you decide to place demands. It's okay to have those easy days. It's okay to say, my client is really off today. We're not going to do the 5 that I had planned. We're going to do 1. And then follow through on that one. So the example I put is SLP walks into the client room for session. The client screams and falls to the floor. The caregiver says, oh, we need to reschedule the session. It has been such a hard day. What we just taught the client is that when the SLP arrives, they get to tantrum and not talk to work. So we have access to tangible activity, and this is engagement and behavior, which in the past has provided the individual access to a desired item or activity. This can reinforce or maintain a behavior by allowing access to a preferred item, or it can eliminate or reduce a behavior by denying access to a desired item. So for example, caregiver tells a client, no soda before dinner. Client screams over and over, give me the soda, I'm about to eat my dinner. Caregiver says, okay, fine, here's your soda, but you better eat all your dinner. You just lost all of your power. It's gone. Your motivation is gone out the window because they already got what they wanted, is that soda. So a lot of, those first then contingencies, parents are like, oh, we're bribing. Well, no, not really, because that's kind of bribing. Like you're giving it to them ahead of time saying, hey, here's your reward, but now you need to do what I asked. Where in ABA, you withhold the reinforcer until they've completed the task at hand. Self-stimulatory behavior. So all this little meme, I thought it was important or relatable. Stemming is like turning down the radio when you smell something burning. It's a way to turn off other senses so you can make sure nothing's burning. When we're driving somewhere new and you have directions, how many of you guys turn down the volume? Like, I need to see where I'm going. You cannot have music on. You can't see where you're going. I feel like that's what our clients are doing. They're trying to meet an internal need. So, I know I do that all the time. Like, turn it down, I need to see the street signs. Somehow it's going to distract me. So, so that is, something that our clients are doing. It's engagement and a behavior that is reinforcing in itself. So this can reinforce or maintain a behavior by allowing the behavior to continue, or it can eliminate or reduce the behavior by blocking the behavior or using sensory extinction. So in your kind of picking example, that's maybe, a self-stimulatory behavior, but it also might function as task avoidance or maybe attention also. So there's the dual functions that can kind of come into play as well, and you have to take that into consideration. If it's truly a self-stimulatory behavior, if you block it, they're no longer going to engage in it. They're probably going to engage in something else because they're not getting their needs met if you just block it. So if you block that spot on their arm that they're picking, they're probably going to pick somewhere on their leg because they need to that need. So we need to help them meet that need in a more socially significant, appropriate way. Picking scabs, not really appropriate. You know, you have a health and safety issue with the blood. Maybe we want to give them some help with a scratch. I don't know if that would be the same need, but worth a try. Maybe peeling stickers might be the same need, or maybe it's seeing the blood. Maybe they would rather put some paint on something and watch it go down. So it's really, when you're working with a self-stimulatory behavior, you really, one of my clients explained it best. My client's dad's actually, he's a parent of a 13-year-old, very minimally verbal boy, and he said it's like feeling around in a dark room for a light switch, so it works. And I feel like that's often the case with self-stimulatory behaviors, because you have to meet their needs. And if you don't know what it is that is giving them that feeling of satisfaction, because maybe they can't talk, you're just guessing. Another example that's been given to me was a client who used to see colors all the time, and he would stem on colors. So they would provide lots of visually stimulating toys and things for this client to look at. And eventually he was verbal, and one day someone was like, why do you do that? And he was like, oh, when I see orange, it tastes like tangerines in my mouth. And they were like, what? And when I see red, it's strawberries in my mouth. And they were like, so then they could program for something tactile that you could eat, and the behavior went away. So it's just one of those things that is very challenging for self-stimulatory behaviors, but it can definitely be done. The example here is the client feels a tingling sensation on the arm. Client places finger on the spot against the scratch, and the client no longer feels a tingling sensation. I always joke that we all have self-stimulatory behaviors. Mine is like bouncing their leg when I'm in a meeting. People twirl their hair, they bite their nails, they crack their knuckles, they, you know, do all these things. And even us as typical adults don't know why we do them sometimes. So it's hard to say why somebody who's not developing typically and has minimal language can tell us why they need to do these things. We have to guess. So there's a behavior change process. The first step is selecting the behavior, the appropriate replacement behavior for change. The second step is withholding the reinforcer that was maintaining that behavior, which we call extinction, and then also changing the antecedent that evokes the inappropriate behavior. So when you're selecting the replacement behavior, there's a couple of rules that you want to follow. So replacement behaviors allow the individual to get their wants and needs met by using a more appropriate or socially acceptable behavior. Without teaching a replacement behavior, they just try another maladaptive behavior typically. So when you're teaching replacement behaviors, they must serve the same function. I see so often hand flapping is a really good example that's programmed for, and I see the replacement behavior that's been chosen is hands on their lap. If that is not a replacement behavior, that's what we want them to do, that's really good. That's not going to meet the need of hand flapping. It also has to yield a higher value of reinforcer, and it must be easier to do or less effortful than the inappropriate behavior. Questions about any of that?
So what would you suggest for hand flapping?
Hand flapping is a tough one. Some of the times I'll see hand flapping associated with like a jumping or a bouncing. I usually like to consult an OT when I see a lot of like movement, but we'll try like a sensory diet for some of those types of things. Sometimes like a weighted vest will really help. Sometimes jumping on a trampoline will really help. Sometimes just saying, go in the corner for 5 minutes and jump around and hand flap, get it all out. Sometimes that helps. So those are definitely things that you can try, because then what you're doing is satiating them on that behavior so that their need has been met, so they don't need to do it anymore. So you're not really getting rid of it, but rather allowing them to have met their needs so they can focus on your therapy session. So we have a couple examples of maladaptive behaviors that we would want to program for replacement behaviors. So we have a child screaming in the kitchen when wanting a cookie. What would be a good replacement behavior for screaming? Something you want them to do.
Ask.
Yeah, ask. Say, cookie please. And it might be maybe the child doesn't have language, so they can't say cookie please. Maybe the replacement behavior is grabbing the adult and bringing it to them and pointing, so that they can gain access to that cookie. And that's much less effortful than screaming for 20 minutes. I tell families a lot, I'm like, screening for 30 minutes is so tiring. You don't know what they want. You're guessing, you want this, you want this, you want this, and they're still screening. But if you just teach them, to bring you to it, or maybe they push a button on their device, whatever it is, that's much less effortful than screening for 30 minutes. What about a teenager hiding under the bed at homework time? So hiding being the behavior that we would want to modify.
Bringing the homework.
That would be something we could do. So the teenager is hiding because they don't want to do their homework. So
Asking for a break.
yes, yes. So that would meet their need, asking to take a break. Or maybe they like underneath the desk or underneath the bed. Maybe there's a magazine or a little board under there. So a good replacement behavior for that would be to take a break from homework, or asking to go there maybe before homework time would be a good antecedent strategy so they didn't go there when it was time for homework. A child is hitting a peer when the peer walks by, so hitting behavior. What might you want to see for replacement behavior? High five, yeah, that's perfect. We do that a lot. We see it a lot at school. They're walking in their lines, a bunch of kids are walking by, they smack them, and the kid's crying. But really, they just say hi to their friend. So we often do high fives or like a thumbs up to be able to get that social interaction they're craving in an appropriate way. Child is biting their hand when the practitioner is talking to the parent. So think about, why might they be biting their hand?
They need something. So
Yeah. So in this case, they're biting their hand. Well, the key here is that the practitioner is talking to the parent. So there's no attention being provided to the child right now. So when the child bites their hand, everybody's like, oh my gosh, what's wrong? Why are you biting your hand? Stop biting your hand. So everybody turns and gives them lots of attention, likely. If that little piece of information wasn't given talking with the parent, and I wouldn't say it was probably for attention. So in this case, they might maybe talk their parent and say, I'm here. Maybe they run over and give them a hug. Something to be able to get attention from the parent in an appropriate way. That makes sense. I know that one's a little bit of a tricky one because it's not something that you would really think would be an appropriate thing to replace biting with.
One of my children I work with in school,
Mhm.
who is that is the little thing, so we put a lot on that's just
So in that case, you guys are blocking the harm, the injury, which is good. You don't want him to cause injury to his hand, but it's not meeting the need. He's not being able to say I'm excited or do something that allows him to be excited. I might suggest giving him something that he can bite, like one of the little chewy tubes. I know they make those, and just putting it right in his hand, and very exciting activity, and help him or her bite on that instead of the hand. Because then it will still meet that need, whatever it is in their mouth that they're getting out of the excitement. So they're not going to hurt themselves. So step 2 is extinction. So in this step, this is always the most challenging step. And I like to warn parents ahead of time that this is the most challenging step, that you're going to be withholding reinforcement from a previously reinforced behavior. This results in what we call an extinction burst. So I tell parents when I come in, I'm like, hi, I'm not here with my magic wand to make things better. They're going to get worse before they get better. They're going to get worse. It can't get worse. But I like to let everybody know that things are going to get worse before they get better. They'll get better. So the graph really just depicts what an extinction burst is, which is that initial increase in the frequency or the intensity of the undesired behavior after baseline. So after intervention starts. Because they're no longer getting access to what they used to, so they're going to try a little bit harder to get access to that. Maybe they're not going to scream for 5 minutes, they're going to scream for 10 now, because why aren't you giving me attention? And then we'll see a nice decreasing trend line, and at some point, we typically see a little bit of spontaneous recovery. That used to work, I'm going to try it again. So as long as everybody's consistent, it will continue to be at low levels. If there's a novel person who's not familiar with the behavior plan and they reinforce this behavior, you will see an increase in behavior again. And then step 3 is altering the antecedent. So this is really important, and it's a very easy thing that almost everybody can do. Providing visual aids, environmental arrangement, high probability requests, you have shared control, first then statements, non-contingent reinforcement, timing, transitional cues, task production. So some of the easiest ones to do are environmental arrangements. So if you have a child who maybe you're working with them at a table and they're always running away from you, well, maybe position yourself in a way that you can kind of keep them, and maybe you don't have the table stacked in the middle, or maybe put it up in a corner of the room so that you can keep them up against the wall so they can't run away from you. Maybe ask the parent to put a baby gate up if they're working in their room so they can't run out the door. Things like that. Those are all very easy environmental arrangements that you guys can do. And then also giving control. Kids love to feel like they're making all the decisions. So I have a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, and I'm constantly have to get dressed. Every morning they get 2 outfits from. I don't care, because all I care is they wear clothes. I don't care if they wear the blue shirt or the white shirt. So that's a really good way to let kids feel like they're in control, is by giving them 2 options of the same thing, because it really doesn't matter if it's blue or red or big or small. It's just that they do it. You guys probably don't care if they do a shape sorter or building blocks, because you need to target both of them. So let them pick. First then statements are always very important. First this, then this. When I go into a session and I don't know what the kid's working for, the kid doesn't know what they're working for. I can't figure it out, and I say, what are they working for? And the team says, oh, well, wrong answer. They have to know what they're working for. So that's the first thing that I look for if the child is engaging in maladaptive behaviors. What are they working for? If they don't know what they're working for, chances are they're not going to be compliant. And even then, they might have changed their mind. 2-year-olds change their mind a lot. Maybe they don't want to play with Elmo anymore. Maybe they want to play with the pink pony. I don't know. So make sure you guys are changing up. Do you still want Elmo? If they're reaching for it, they still want it. If they're not reaching for it, they don't want it anymore. That's not an effective reinforcer. Change it. You don't have to stick to it. You're not married to it. Just because you said first we're going to do this activity, then we're going to play with Elmo, you don't have to follow through with playing with Elmo. You can do a different activity. Please do a different activity because it needs to be reinforcing. The exception to the behavior change process is if there is a self-injurious or a behavior that has a risk of injury, like head banging or eye poking or face slapping for extinction. Why would it not be utilized? Why? Yeah, because of this, it gets worse. If they're banging their head into a wall 30 times a session, we don't want them banging their head into a wall 50 times a session. That would be bad. So we never use extinction for self-injurious behaviors. If you have a client with a serious self-injurious behavior and they're causing harm to themselves, please seek out a BCBA. They will help you manage that behavior effectively, and you're going to need somebody to help treat that behavior. Reinforcement. So primary reinforcers are things that we need to survive. There's no learning history to make them valuable. And there are 7 types: food, water, air, physical stimulation, sleep, heat, and sex. Examples can be hugs, Skittles, apple juice, sleeping, shelter. All those things are valuable without any learning history. Secondary reinforcers or conditioned are things that have a previously neutral stimuli that have been paired with primary reinforcers or other established secondary reinforcers. Money is a really good example. There's no value to money except that maybe you want to buy food, maybe you want to live in a house, or maybe you need clothes. All of those things are primary reinforcers because they've been paired with a secondary reinforcer. High fives, that's another big one. I see high fives all the time. Some kids innately love giving high fives because they just love social praise, but then especially kids on the autism spectrum, they're not as social as other kids, and high fives are just not nearly as reinforcing as they are for other kids that have to be paired with something. So sometimes you might need to pair a high five with a Skittle or something initially so you can fade away those food reinforcers. So then we have what's called a contrived reinforcer versus a natural reinforcer. So reinforcers are usually used in a training environment, and they're additional reinforcers that increase the future frequency of the behavior. They're usually set up by the learner's teacher in order to increase the probability. They're not natural, like natural reinforcers. And I'll go over a couple of examples, but contrived reinforcers are like getting tickles for engaging in correct response or verbal praise. Natural reinforcers are when the client says mommy and mommy looks at them and gives them attention. So here's some examples. So we have a reinforcer of someone saying good job after the child has finished cleaning up. Is that a primary or a secondary reinforcer? Is it contrived or natural? Contrived. So it's secondary and it's contrived because the natural reinforcer would be just having a nice clean room, being happy that your toys are away. Getting a drink of water after saying water. Primary or secondary? Primary. Contrived or natural? Natural. Good. Going to break after completing a puzzle. So secondary and natural. And the reason why this one is secondary is because a break is not always something that is reinforcing. It's usually paired with work. And it is a natural reinforcer. Getting skills after finishing work. Primary or secondary?
Primary, because food.
And it's contrived. Everybody doesn't get skills after they work. Going outside for a walk after putting on your shoes. Primary or secondary?
Secondary.
Contrived or natural? So it's natural and primary. And the reason why it's primary is going outside for a walk is getting that air. So that air is something that is natural. Primary. And then the natural is that you put your shoes on, you usually go outside. With the natural thing. Mom, you need a band-aid and a hug after your child's been burning. Primary or secondary?
There's two.
There is two.
The Band-Aid.
Yeah, I'll take that. Yes.
Primary.
Good. Yeah. I didn't even think about that, but yeah, absolutely. And then contrived or natural? Natural. Yeah. So that's something that, you're getting that touch after, somebody's in the need, and you laugh at that more getting skilled. Earning money for completing tasks. Primary or secondary?
Secondary.
Contrived or natural?
Contrived.
Yeah, contrived. We think of it as natural because it happens so much that it is contrived. Putting on a coat so you don't feel cold. Primary or secondary?
Primary.
Contrived or natural?
Natural.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a few different schedules of reinforcement. We have a fixed ratio and a variable ratio. I don't want to go too much into detail on this because these get very, very specific, and there's like 10 chapters, and I'm trying to squeeze in like 2 years of a master's degree in 2 hours. So it's funny. I was telling some of my colleagues and just kind of chatting about, what they would feel might be important for a speech pathologist to know about computer management. I'm going down a rabbit hole. I gotta get out and, touch over a lot of different things. It's helpful. But there is fixed ratio and variable ratio, and there is a fixed interval and a variable, fixed interval and variable ratio. So this is the graph of what those look like. So we have the variable ratio, which is the red line, which is really high rates of responding. And then there's a fixed ratio, which is kind of next. And then we have our variable interval followed by our fixed interval. So the ratio schedules are the ones that respond more quickly, and the other ones don't. And then you'll see the fixed schedules have sort of a scallop associated with them. And so for here, for example, a fixed interval, this might be, so for when we are testing for our BCBA, we always often refer to this because we have certain testing cycles when we test for our certification, and they're 4 times a year. And we call it, the lag time is called a post-reinforcement pause. So when you're studying, you don't take a test and usually study the next day. That's called the post-reinforcement pause because you know that it's not going to be reinforcing to study the next day after you just took a test, but you're not going to have a test for another 3 months. So you know when it's coming. That's why a lot of teachers like to do like offices because there's no post-reinforcement pause. So we have which schedule of reinforcement is used to establish new skills. and which one used in maintain skills. I'll go back to them, so we don't go too much in detail on it, but we have the ratios would be used for establishing new skills because you get higher rates of responding, and the thick this one should be interval variable interval over here. We use those in order to maintain behaviors because there's that post reinforcement loss. Reinforcers, by definition, are a stimulus change that increases the future frequency of the behavior that immediately precedes it. The direct effects of reinforcement involve quote, temporal relations between behavior and its consequence that are the order of a few seconds. So when you are trying to reinforce a response, don't push the 60-second time limit. Really try to push the other end, the 0 second. It's really, really important when you're reinforcing, when you're providing the reinforcer, that it's handy and you can do it. I like this myself within 3 to 4 seconds. It is crucial, especially for a child with emerging skills, because in that time frame, they might not know what, especially for a very low functioning child, they might not know what you're reinforcing. And at some point in between, when they did the correct response, they might do something else, and then you provide reinforcement, and they think, oh, that's what I need to do to get that. So it's critical that the reinforcer is provided immediately. 3 to 4 seconds is the rule of thumb. The longer you go, the less likely you are to reinforce the right behavior. Makes sense? So how do I identify reinforcers? If time, energy, and resources will be lost if planned interventions were to fail because a practitioner used a presumed instead of an actual reinforcer, and that happens a lot. You know, the age, the interest level, even the time of day or deprivation satiation levels can affect reinforcers. Whether they're effective or ineffective. So how do you identify reinforcers? There's a few different ways. There are stimulus preference assessments, and those ones fall under asking either the person, the significant other, or giving a free task choice. There's free operant, which is contrived observation or naturalistic observation. And there's trial-based. I'm not going to go into the specifics of trial-based because they are very, very specific, but there's what's called single stimulus, paired stimuli, and multiple stimuli. And then there's a reinforcer assessment you can do in the moment, concurrent schedules, multiple schedules, or progressive ratios. So with asking the person, this is obviously the easiest. Hey, what do you want to work for today? I want to work for my purple truck. Yay, great, perfect, done, easy. You can always ask them, you don't know the language. So asking significant others, what do they like to play with? What do you think they would like to work for? Giving a free task choice. So do I work for this or this? Give pictures, maybe hold up the actual items, whatever it is, so that they can identify what it is that they want to work for. Contrived free operant observation. So in this one, this is kind of an easy one. If maybe the parents are like, I don't know what changes every day, I have no idea what they want today. You can do what's called like salting the environment with a variety of items and just see what they gravitate towards, and like, oh, you like this? All right, let's work for it. Great. Free operant observation is just conducting learners' everyday environment, playground, classroom, and observing what they play with as unobtrusively as possible. Single stimulus is a very specific way of presenting one stimulus at a time and recording their interactions. Paired stimuli is basically that forced choice, so we'll have two. Which one? Multiple stimuli. Multiple stimuli are presented in an array of 3 or more, and they're paired very systematically so that each one is paired and they're all ranked. And there are programs that do that for you, which is really good. And then in the moment, the learner's response can be followed by the presentation of the stimulus change, and then that reinforcer is noted. And then there's concurrent schedules and multiple schedules and progressive ratio schedules, which I'm not going to go too deep into, but they're there in case you want to look them up. Prompting. So I know you guys do get some prompting, but I just wanted to touch on it briefly. I don't know how much you guys get on prompting. So it's an additional cue or assistance provided to the therapist to ensure that they produce the correct response. Has to be used when a client learns a new or emerging skill, and it increases the opportunities for correct responses to be reinforced, and it has to be faded immediately. And fading prompts, again, depends on the client's level of responding. So this is kind of the ABA prompting hierarchy, with physical being the most intrusive, all the way down to time delay being the least intrusive, and kind of what that definition of those behaviors are. Prompt fading, I feel like, is one of the most important things that is often forgotten. People do lots of physical prompts and they just kind of don't be independent. So don't forget to fade the prompts. The procedure is known as transfer of stimulus control, which happens by gradually fading one stimuli in or out and presenting or removing the antecedent stimuli. So, for example, we might be wanting a client to say, you know, I don't know, holding up a red car and saying red, maybe this person can read, but they can't talk, I don't know. And so maybe you hold up a visual that says the word red for them to read and say, oh, red. And then maybe over time, it's maybe the words are red. Maybe over time it will be black and white. Maybe it's just the R. But maybe you're just holding up a card that has nothing on it. Then maybe eventually you hold your hand up, and then that's the key for them to say red. So I have a little meme that says, Patty's teacher returned the book on applied behavior analysis before he had a chance to read the chapter on fading physical prompts. So the person is over there doing this, they're saying yes, because that's how they prompted them to say yes. I actually did have a client who we were teaching to say yes and no, and we did, and he would go like this himself. So that was an interesting one to fade, because we used the physical prompt and then had to fade it. But we should have never used the physical prompt in the first place. And again, to fade prompts, the current prompt or the more intrusive prompt must be paired with the next prompt. And after pairing the prompts, then the instruction and less intrusive prompt is used. Incorrect responses can be a result of a new skill within the reinforcement history, an emerging skill, which is still occurring at an inconsistent rate. Okay.
For the prompt,
so we actually had to go back and reteach, and we had to block his hand every time we were asking a yes or no question. We had to keep his hands down. We had to have two people for this, so I had to have mom sit behind him and hold his hands down when I asked him a yes or no question, and then I would hold something that he liked. If I was saying like, "Do you want the marker?" I knew he really wanted it, and I would move it up and down so he would track it and say yes. But it took a lot of time to break that, unfortunately.
did that cause, like, would you only react to doing this?
No, so eventually I stopped moving it. So I would do really big. So he was like over exaggerating, and then I just very slowly we would do this, and then eventually I would just put it up. Yes. So it was quite the process, because we had to go back and do some extra work rather than what we needed to do. But it was a good lesson to be taught, and I'm trying to share that with everybody. And then I found the name on it. So and then we have task avoidance. So the skill may be in the client's repertoire, but it's not occurring when it's being asked. So those are the ones we don't want to prompt, because it's in the client's repertoire. So I tell staff to hold them up. We are there to work on behaviors. Speech pathologists are not there to work on behaviors, but I share parents all the time. I'm like, this is what I'm here to do. It might look like we're doing nothing because we're waiting this out, but in the long run, they're going to engage in this behavior much faster. So there's a can't do versus a won't do, and it's sometimes hard to tell the difference between the two, whether it's a skill deficit or not. Task avoidant behavior is due to the client not being able to do the task. They might need additional prompting to check if it's can't do or won't do, make sure their motivation is high. So if you have something that they really want, they're just dying for that skill, you can see it every time that you bring it up. Yes, I want it, and they still aren't engaging in whatever it is that you're asking them. They probably can't do it. And they probably need help to do it, to be successful, to gain access to that reinforcer. When it's a won't do, you'll see task avoidant behavior is due to the client's motivation being low. So I do that with, if we're asking a client to do something and they're not doing it, I say pull out the reinforcer, ask them if they still want it. If they reach for it or look towards it or look like they're excited about it, probably it won't do. If they don't care about it, they don't want that anymore. Something different. It's okay, like I said, to change your reinforcer mid-task. You're not married to the reinforcers. So to set up your session for success, teaching material should be prepared in advance and match the client's skill level. You want to be aware of the instructional setting. I think this is a really important one. Are you in a classroom? Are there a lot of other kids around? Are you in their home? Is brother taking a nap? You know, is there a big vase on the table next to you? Do you want to move that? So just be aware of their instructional setting. Is it conducive to learning for this client? If you're in the living room and mom's watching a TV show, you might turn off the TV because they're staring at the TV. Those are types of things that we should do before we set up the session rather than trying to work around it. So especially in somebody's home, in a clinic, you have a lot more control over a lot of these things because you're in a clinic setting and it's conducive to learning. But in a home or classroom setting or even a hospital setting, you don't have control over all these variables. You know, if you're in a hospital setting, somebody right next door might be moaning because they're in pain, and you know your patient's very distracted. So those are things you just don't have control of. So if you walk into a setting that doesn't look like it's conducive for learning, make modifications. Even if it means you can't maybe get started for 10 more minutes, it's going to be better because you're going to have a better session because you spent those 10 minutes rearranging the environment rather than spending 30 minutes of your session figuring out what that was a waste. Always letting the client know what they're working for. Always giving the client information on when they can take their next break. Providing visual information as much as possible, especially for those who don't have language or maybe are having trouble interpreting language. How to increase compliance before the session, using first then statements, client choice, providing information like by a visual schedule, what will be break time, what they're working for, control environmental distractors, and framing. So letting them know, in 1 minute, we're going to clean up. That way they're prepared. In 30 seconds, we're going to clean up. In 10 seconds, we're going to clean up. 10, 9, 8, 7. You know, let them know what's coming, especially the little ones. You know, 1 minute might as well be 30 minutes. There's really not that concept of time. So during your session, you should vary your tasks and activities. You should intersperse easy or mastered skills with newly introduced skills. Shared control, so turn taking. So let them pick an activity and you pick an activity. Using natural reinforcement as much as possible. Reinforcing attempts. And I think this is really important. I think you guys probably learned a lot about reinforcing attempts because they need to feel successful. You know, a lot of parents I'll hear, you know, truck, and they're like, truck please. I'm like, no, just truck. We're gonna please later. So they really want some of those niceties that society likes, but really when they're learning language, we just want to reinforce those attempts. And then waiting out a behavior. So don't remove or reduce the demand if there's a behavior happening. Wait it out. So some BCBA and SLP collaboration. So I took a couple of quotes from the first one from the BACB task list. Practice within one's limits of professional competence and applied behavior analysis, and obtain consultation, supervision, training, or make referrals as necessary. And then from ASHA, individuals use every resource, including referral when appropriate, to ensure the high quality of services provided. So what BCB and SLP collaboration is not easy. It's not something that comes naturally to everybody, and it's not about feeling good when you're done collaborating. It is about a commitment from the other professional on a shared goal, which is the progress of your client. It's demanding and it requires very careful attention to communication skills. And it requires that professionals need to be impartial throughout their interactions. So I love collaborating with SLP. It's probably one of my favorite things. If I could have an SLP come out every single one of my ABA cases to consult on the communication domain, I would, hands down. I don't know anything about articulation or how to make certain sounds happen. I know nothing about that. I can try, and I've had a lot of experience over the years that I feel like I do a pretty decent job at that. But if I could have an SLP come out and consult for every, I would. So it's not always fun or happy. Some people don't like to consult with other professionals, and you're going to come across that in your professional career. People just think they know everything and they don't want to bring in somebody else who has a different maybe mindset, and that can be very challenging. So it's important to know that it's not going to be easy and it's not going to come naturally. So some SLP and BCB similarities I'm going to here. ABA and speech are the treatment components that are most frequently requested by parents. Parents care that their child talks, period. Adults maybe stroke. They want to talk again. They want to get their needs met. This is how people get their needs met. They want to talk. ABA does a lot of that, but they also reduce the maladaptive behaviors so they can engage in those behaviors. Because if they're so busy engaging in maladaptive behaviors, they can't talk, well then you guys can't do your job. ABA and speech are highly focused on the individual distinctive learning styles and the results of the treatment. So it's highly, highly individualized. There's no like one kind of catch-all program that you're just going to try with most of your clients. It's highly, highly individualized. ABA and speech address skill deficits differently by teaching specific language behaviors rather than treating the problem indirectly, like specialized diets or sensory stimulation. So we treat the problem rather than indirectly treating the problem. Procedures that are supported by objective evidence-based research are used in both speech and ABA. And the individual's performance is measured by collecting data. So this will guide clinical recommendations and any changes to instructions. So there are just a few similarities that I do there. How a BCBA can help a speech session. They can conduct what's called a functional analysis to determine the function of a complex behavior, provide strategies for environmental modification, conduct preference assessments, and provide teaching to family on how their responses outside of session can impact the treatment session. How an SLP can help an ABA session, can provide valuable information regarding speech and language goals, can help ensure all therapists are using similar vocabulary, can offer information to the family on developmentally appropriate linguistic forms and the developmental norms of communication sequences, and can aid in the diagnosis and treatment of disorders. So I have a couple little scenarios that I'm just going to throw at you guys. Joey's an 8-year-old boy with a diagnosis of autism. He's minimally verbal, using 1 to 2 word phrases to communicate. The intelligibility of a language is low. He receives speech therapy in a small group setting in school 3 times per week, individual speech therapy at home 1 time per week, and he receives behavior support in the classroom for his entire school day, and he receives home-based ABA for 8 hours per week. Behaviors are decreasing at school and at home, but continue to remain steady with the speech pathologist at school and at home. Parents want to terminate speech because it's not working. Concerns. How do we talk to the parent about this? And what options are there for reducing the behaviors during speech lessons? What do you guys think?
Every child is different. So maybe once a week at home with speech therapy is not enough. And then 3 times a week in a small group setting, maybe they might not be doing well with other students around them.
Yeah, absolutely. So we definitely need to look at what's going on with those speech sessions. So something's going on. Maybe the speech pathologist doesn't want a behavior plan, or maybe, you know, but the answer is definitely not to terminate speech, because this client only has 1 to 2 word phrases and they're 8. So we definitely want to continue with speech. So, you know, talking about that. I have another one. Sarah is an 18-year-old female who's nonverbal with a diagnosis of autism. She uses an AAC device to communicate her wants and needs. She receives speech therapy at school and ABA at home. She engages in severe maladaptive behaviors that include taking off her clothes, urinating and defecating on the floor, and throwing dangerous objects like staff, such as knives, chairs, and glass items. Behaviors are occurring across all environments. So a few questions for this. Who's in charge of her plan? How will the team communicate? What is the plan in place for the dangerous behaviors? And what is the plan for the unsanitary behaviors? So if you're a speech pathologist and you have a client who's getting speech and they engage in these behaviors, what are your thoughts?
Consult with parents.
Yeah. What else?
Is there AAC working actively?
Yeah. They're obviously not getting their needs met because they're having all these behaviors. This individual feels the need to take off their clothes to get their needs met. So maybe they need a button on there that says I'm hot. Maybe I need to use the restroom. So maybe that's not programmed on there. So the team definitely needs to be able to communicate with each other so that everybody can be on the same page. And then I just wanted to kind of throw this up there. BLC does have opportunities for part-time employment. If anybody's interested, we we're always looking for people. We're very flexible with schedules. And we have this little number here that you can actually just text the word speech to, and it'll give you these little prompts and what it look like. So I wanted to go over any specific questions that you guys had, specific case scenarios you had a question on, to be able to help. Sure.
What if a behavior starts as escape and you identify, like, they verbally say, like, I want to do that, and then you try and bring them back and follow through, and then they start laughing at your attempts to follow through, and you see that as a change to attention seeking.
So in that instance, those escape maintain my attention behaviors are very challenging to decrease and minimize. What I often do is redirect the client back without providing any attention, without saying anything. They already know what they're doing is outside of escape. There's no need to say, come on back, we're doing our work, or it's time to work one time, and then bring them back to the work, or bring work to them and have them complete it, so that there is very, very little attention given, as minimal as possible during that time. So that is one of the more challenging things to eliminate quickly, at least. That's
I have a question for one of the live streamers.
Mhm.
She wants to know, she says, right now I'm working with a child newly diagnosed with autism. We do a lot of swinging and deep pressure activities. If we do not get him regulated, he's violent. Any advice on working with severe cases like this? And she also wants to mention that the behaviors are very severe, such as fighting, hitting, stopping hard. She wants to know if giving him what he wants should reduce those.
Yeah, it seems like they're definitely trying to treat the behavior indirectly with some of those antecedent strategies, but they may need to look more at the function of the behavior and meet that need rather than providing, because it looks like they're providing all the antecedent strategies they possibly can, but whatever that behavior is functioning as is continuing to be reinforced, which is why it's still occurring. And they're likely going to need to consult a behavior analyst to come in and identify what the functions of the behavior are, and maybe even create a behavior plan for the team to follow so that intervention can be conducted. Sure.
If you have a client that's that you notice stims whenever you kind of push them to work a little bit harder in therapy, but you still want therapy to get done, but you don't want to push that client too hard, how do you walk that line?
It is, it's a fine line, and as you start to get to know your client, you're going to know, and there's probably engaging in stemming behavior because it's a self-soothing, self-management type strategy for them. You know, we get nervous and we pick our nails or fidget with our hair or shake our leg. Those are our self-management strategies, where this client's self-management strategy might be to, you know, hand flap or, you know, do any of those other, you know, self-stimulatory behaviors that you might see, but it is a very fine line. And I would suggest, as you get to know your client, know how much you can step that line and still be able to bring them back to the session without completely losing them with this very difficult task into their comfort zone of the self-stimulatory behaviors. Does that make sense? So it's hard because you really have to get to, and the parents are going to know them best. I always suggest to talk to the parents as well about, and then really also making sure that that need is met. So it could be functioning as escape, but it could also be I have this need that's not being met. Maybe we're halfway into the session and I'm kind of feeling bored. I need to engage in this. So you can proactively give them breaks or proactively give them time to engage in that behavior, so they're in a sense satiated on it, and then bring them back to the behavior. So I did have a little girl who would engage in this really deep throaty behavior. It was like her, you know, often, and she would do it when we pushed her. So every, it was 20 minutes, I would have her sit in her throat chair, we called it, and she would make the sound over and over for 3 minutes. And then we would come back and do the difficult task because she was kind of anxious about it. And it was hard for her, so it was really self-soothing. But because she had just sat in a chair and made the noise for 3 minutes, she didn't need to make it while we were teaching her the new skill. Sure.
How would you deal with a client who is nonverbal, and when you're working on the task with them, they would just randomly run to you and start hitting you and like pull your hair, and they're laughing kind of, because I've dealt with that, but I never understood how to, because the speech pathologist just told me to say no, and then he would, but I would not have to hold on to him and say no, and then he wouldn't stop because he would just keep trying to do the same thing.
Right, because it's probably for attention.
Right.
So you're not giving him a replacement behavior to meet his needs appropriately by saying, I want tickles or hug me or some appropriate way to get attention. So I would suggest giving them the language or even like a sign for hug or tickles and maybe push it on their device to be able to get attention appropriately rather than running up and doing that.
What about a client that starts showing behavior before going to therapy, and then anything that you try to present to them is just like, nope, no.
So I would suggest in that case that you need to repair yourself as being fun and being reinforcing. Forget doing therapy and have a super fun day, all child choice, and be fun again. And just kind of do a blank slate menu to that for a session or two and rebuild that rapport with the client. But it looks like the rapport is probably the loss, and that happens sometimes as you're working through sessions. And you just need to rebuild the rapport and kind of just do a blank slate again.
She has like history of doing previous semesters. And I know, like, I have things that I know she wants to do, but her automatic answer is no. And it's hard to kind of get her to just even like sit down or follow the instructions and things like that. And so we get lost in something.
Yeah, I would come in and start the session with like 6 highly preferred things out and say, you pick all of them. You don't even have to work for them. We're just going to do these today. All of them. Don't even have to work. And then you can slowly bring that back. And you're going to have to let the parents know, look, I have to do this because I really need to repair myself with being fun right now. I'm not fun and she's not wanting to work for me. We're not getting anything done anyways. But at least now she's going to like me again. Try that.
Do you have any advice for dealing with parents who are not consistent with behavior plan?
So I really like to let parents know, you know, right now your child is cute at 2, 3, or even 5, but I really try to put it in perspective and say, you know, when your child is 15 and they're still engaging in this behavior, what are you going to think of that? You know, the biggest one that I see as a behavior analyst is toilet training. Oh, it's too hard, I'm not ready. I just always want to put them in the pull-up. It's messy. It's very cumbersome to do the toilet every 20 minutes, all day, every day. You really can't go anywhere because where do you go in 20 minutes? The car seat is a mess. You know, there's lots of variables. So I like to tell them, especially my lower functioning kids, I say, you're going to miss the window. They care right now that they're wet. They're not going to care anymore if they're wet. And then you're going to have a 15-year-old girl who has a menstrual cycle and is getting changed, and that will lead to sexual abuse. You're like, oh my God, toilet training right now. So I really like to let them know what that looks like when they become an adult, because that usually helps them get on board a little bit better. If they're just not being consistent and they're on board, that's a different problem, and it's escape behavior, and you really need to have a behavior plan for their behavior. And I do that. Sometimes I make behavior plans for parents. Yeah. Sure. Did you want to run?
Yeah, I mean, it's not super related to speech pathology.
Yeah.
I'm a teacher assistant at elementary school, and I'm kind of, so as a TA, you kind of have different assignments, but in my case, I've been kind of assigned to the same classroom, like, you know, like long intervals throughout the day. And I'm working with this little boy right now, and he has like a whole array of like challenging behaviors, and they've already they've gone through 2 SSPTs with him, and he's on a behavior plan right now. And so, you know, forgive me if the terminology is incorrect, but I think it's like a interval ratio type of schedule where for every 5 to 10 increments that he's accomplished like a desired task, we give him a star. And so we've been doing that, and when we first kind of introduced it, he responded well, and you know, we got him to sit at his desk and just work and keep him from running out of the classroom or hitting the kids. But we're noticing that we're seeing like a regression of those behaviors. So he's starting to run out of the classroom again, and he's screaming out loud in class. There was one time where he like urinated by a tree in front of other children. And so these behaviors are getting out of hand. And today the teacher had his parent come in and sit with him. And when the parent left, he just reverted back to his, old behaviors. And so,
Yeah,
what would
it
you
sounds
recommend?
like the token chart that's being used was reinforcing and it's not anymore.
Right.
So that needs to be reevaluated and more creative behavior plan. And then I know there's not a lot of options in the school setting. I don't love when parents are called in because it really just teaches the child that when I act like this, my mom comes, yay. Or like when the principal's office, like, oh, I get to sit here and draw while I'm in the principal's office, yay. Or even suspension. I mean, I get that it's needed, but like I get to be home for 3 days because I acted like that. Those are really tough things. And it, in my opinion, it really comes down to how often the behavior analyst is providing supervision to the team that's there, because it really needs to be modified if it's not working, and they should have more strategies for you to be able to implement.
Right. And I just feel like there's a miscommunication and what's being discussed in the SSPT and like what I get, because I'm the one who's really getting a lot of that face time with me. And so it's just a little bit aggravating for me personally, because I feel like I'm on the move in terms of like, what we should be currently working on. And I think the school psychologist is the one who's managing the behavior plan. I'm not sure if there's a behavior analyst.
Yeah, and that's probably another problem too. And that happens a lot. The school psychologists do the behavior plans and they're kind of trained, but not really. So it's like the better of the two evils, I guess. So I don't have a lot of resources for you, because what you really need is a behavior analyst in there programming for the child and telling you what to do.
Thank you.
Sure. Well, it's been a pleasure being here for you guys. Actually, I wanted to put like a behavior if anybody wants the slide from your email address, and I could just have it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, of course. I think some people are already like know this stuff in a way.